Remember when the Flintstones was just another cartoon you watched in reruns? Turns out it was never meant to be a kid show at all. When it premiered on ABC in 1960, it was a primetime sitcom designed for adults, complete with work stress, marriage jokes, and cigarette commercials. The premise was simple. Fred and Wilma Flintstone, their best friends and neighbors Barney and Betty Rubble, and eventually their kids Pebbles and Bam Bam, living everyday suburban life in prehistoric Bedrock, complete with dinosaur appliances and rock puns. For 6 seasons and 166 episodes, The Flintstones was must-see TV. From near lawsuits to cash shakeups, The Flintstones has a past that's even wilder than a night out at the Water Buffalo Lodge. Today, we're counting down 15 weird and wonderful facts about the original modern Stone Age family, the stuff you never saw in syndication and definitely didn't learn from Fruity Pebbles commercials. Now, before we jump in, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your fellow retro TV fans who still say yabba dabba doo unironically. And stick around for number 1, because the real reason the Flintstones even exist might be the most surprising thing in cartoon history. Now, let's get into the countdown with number 15, the baby that made TV history. In 1963, America made an event out of a cartoon baby being born. The birth of Pebbles Flintstone became one of the most hyped moments in 60s television, turning a sitcom plot into something the entire world was talking about. The big moment came in the season 3 episode The Blessed Event, which aired in February of 1963. But the build-up started way before Wilma went into labor at Bedrock Hospital. Hanna-Barbera launched a global Name the Baby contest, inviting viewers to guess the baby's name, weight, and gender. For an animated show, that was completely unprecedented. When the results came in, the winning entry was Pebbles, submitted by an anonymous Florida butcher who walked away with a round-the-world trip and $2,000 in spending money. Not bad for filling out a postcard. And honestly, the name was perfect. Pebbles Flintstone sounded both adorable and totally on brand for the modern Stone Age family. The hype paid off. Millions of people tuned in to watch a cartoon character give birth, turning The Blessed Event into one of the most watched episodes in early TV history. It proved something Hanna-Barbera probably hadn't expected. Audiences weren't just watching for the rock puns and dinosaur gags, they actually cared about these characters. That episode was everywhere. Fan mail, news coverage, water cooler gossip the next morning. It was the kind of TV moment that doesn't happen much anymore. If you watch the episode in syndication today, you'll miss most of the original contest promotions, but you can still catch a glimpse of the suspense in the way they revealed her name and gender. The arrival of Pebbles didn't just add a new character to the show, it proved the Flintstones had become something bigger than a cartoon. People were genuinely invested in what happened in Bedrock, and that's probably the moment when the show stopped being just an animated sitcom and became a full-on cultural juggernaut. Number 14, Jackie Gleason almost yabba dabba sued. The Flintstones nearly had a major legal problem before it became a cultural phenomenon. The threat? One very angry bus driver from Brooklyn. In the early 60s, Jackie Gleason, the star and creator of The Honeymooners, noticed something familiar about this new modern Stone Age family. Fred Flintstone was basically Ralph Cramden with a club, Barney Rubble was Ed Norton in animal skins, and Wilma and Betty filled the same long-suffering wife who somehow keeps it together roles as Alice and Trixie. Even Fred's voice actor, Alan Reed, had done voiceover work for Gleason and brought a similar energy to the role. Gleason's lawyers told him he had a slam dunk case. He could sue Hanna-Barbera, prove the Flintstones was an animated carbon copy of The Honeymooners, and maybe even pull it off the air entirely. But then they asked one fateful question. Do you really want to be known as the man who killed Fred Flintstone? That stopped Jackie Gleason cold. Rather than become the guy who destroyed Primetime's first animated hit, he let it go. Hanna and Barbera admitted the resemblance. Hanna even called The Honeymooners the funniest show on TV and said it heavily influenced the Flintstones, but they always treated the comparison as a compliment, not a crime. So, Bedrock survived not because of copyright law, but because Jackie Gleason didn't want that kind of legacy. Number 13, the car crash that could have silenced Barney Rubble. In January of 1961, the Flintstones nearly lost its lovable sidekick and one of the greatest voices in animation history when Mel Blanc, the guy who voiced Barney Rubble, Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig, and half the Looney Tunes gang, was in a devastating car accident on Sunset Boulevard. Blanc's sports car collided head-on with another vehicle at a curve so dangerous the city eventually rebuilt it. The crash left both his legs and pelvis shattered, plus a triple skull fracture that put him in a coma for weeks. Doctors weren't sure he'd survived, and even if he did, no one knew if he would ever speak again. But here's where the story gets incredible. That one line, it told everyone that Mel Blanc and all those voices were still in there fighting. While Blanc recovered, Hanna-Barbera brought in voice veteran Dawes Butler to temporarily step in as Barney. Butler had actually voiced the character in the original Flintstones pilot, so he knew the role. For 5 episodes, Butler kept Bedrock running while Blanc worked through months of grueling rehab, and when Blanc was finally ready to return, he didn't wait until he could walk into the studio. Instead, Hanna-Barbera brought the studio to him. The crew set up recording equipment in his hospital room, and Blanc delivered Barney's lines from his hospital bed, surrounded by the rest of the cast who refused to record without him. After the accident, Blanc's voice for Barney took on a slightly deeper tone. You can hear it if you listen closely, but Bedrock never missed a beat, and neither did Mel Blanc. Not even a near-fatal car crash could keep him from doing what he loved. Number 12, the first primetime cartoon that paved the way for The Simpsons. Long before Homer yelled, there was Fred shouting, and doing it in primetime. When the Flintstones premiered on ABC on September 30th of 1960, it made television history as the first original animated series ever broadcast during primetime hours. Families would gather around their TVs for a show that appealed to adults and kids. The humor hit where grown-ups lived: work stress, marriage, bills, and trying to keep your boss happy at the stone quarry. Meanwhile, kids loved the slapstick, the Stone Age gadgets like that pterodactyl record player and all the dinosaur mayhem. But the show was designed with adults in mind, and the original sponsor made that crystal clear: Winston Cigarettes. For the first 2 seasons, Fred and Barney literally hawked smokes during commercial breaks. It wasn't until season 3, right after Pebbles was born, that the network realized maybe cartoon characters promoting cigarettes to a growing audience of kids wasn't the best look. Winston was out, and Welch's grape juice was in. Much more family-friendly. The show pushed boundaries in other ways too. Fred and Wilma were one of the first married couples on TV, animated or otherwise, to share a bed. You know, because married couples sleeping in the same bed was scandalous back then. The Flintstones held the title as the longest-running primetime animated series for nearly 3 decades, until The Simpsons finally surpassed it in 1997 and even gave Fred a cheeky shout-out in an episode. Without the Flintstones, there would be no Simpsons, no Family Guy, and probably no streaming lineup full of animated dysfunctional families. Fred walked so Homer could waddle, and TV has never been the same since. Number 11, The Great Gazoo and the Moment Bedrock Jumped the Shark. Every long-running show eventually hits that moment where things get weird. For the Flintstones, that moment floated in from outer space wearing a green helmet and calling everyone Dum-Dum. Enter the Great Gazoo, voiced by Harvey Korman of Carol Burnett show fame, who crash-landed in Bedrock in October of 1965 during season 6. According to the storyline, Gazoo was an alien from the planet Zetox, banished to Earth for inventing a doomsday device. Fred and Barney stumble across his spaceship, and suddenly they're stuck with a magical alien servant who only they and the kids can see. Naturally, this leads to Wilma thinking Fred's lost his prehistoric mind every other episode. Here's where things went off the rails. Gazoo could do anything. Materialize objects, teleport people, time travel, you name it, which is exactly the problem. The show that started as a clever Stone Age sitcom about work stress and marriage had suddenly turned into a sci-fi fantasy with a floating alien who solved problems with magic. It completely broke what made the Flintstones work in the first place: watching modern problems get solved with prehistoric solutions, not cosmic shortcuts. The move was a desperate attempt to boost slipping ratings by jumping on the magical sitcom bandwagon. Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie were huge, so why not give Bedrock a supernatural sidekick? Except instead of saving the show, Gazoo became the poster child for what fans call now jumping the shark. That moment when a series tries too hard to stay relevant and loses what made it special. Gazoo only lasted 11 episodes before the series ended in April of 1966, but the damage was done. Viewers found him annoying. Critics saw him as proof the show had run out of ideas, and looking back, he's basically the official mascot of "this show is about to get canceled." So, while producers hoped the Great Gazoo would be Bedrock's magic bullet, he ended up being its death rattle. Number 10, the Flintstones were almost the Flagstones. Imagine tuning in to ABC in 1960 and hearing "Welcome to the Flagstones." Sounds like a geology textbook, right? Well, Hanna-Barbera almost made that mistake, and it took a panicked last-minute scramble to save their entire show. In the original 1959 pilot, Fred and Wilma weren't Flintstones at all. They were Flagstones. The name made it through early production, promo materials, and even voice recordings before someone finally bothered to check if anyone else was already using it. Spoiler alert, they were. Turns out the Flagstone family had been happily living in the Sunday Funnies for years, specifically in King Features comic strip Hi and Lois. And the last thing this brand new studio needed was to kick off their first primetime series by immediately getting dragged into court for trademark infringement. So, with weeks to go, Hanna-Barbera went into full panic mode. They tossed around alternatives. The Gladstones was briefly considered and just as quickly rejected before finally landing on a name that actually worked: the Flintstones. It was stronger, punchier, and way better for a Stone Age pun. Honestly, it's hard to imagine Fred Flintstone being called Fred Flagstone. It just doesn't hit the same, and it sounds wrong coming out of your mouth. So the next time that theme song gets stuck in your head, remember, we were this close to singing Meet the Flagstones. Thank goodness someone caught it before millions of dollars in merchandise got printed with the wrong name. That would have been a yabba dabba disaster. Number 9, when Hollywood moved to Bedrock. By the mid-1960s, the Flintstones had become such a primetime hit that actual Hollywood stars started lining up to voice their own cartoon doppelgangers. Decades before The Simpsons or Family Guy turned celebrity cameos into an art form, Fred and Barney were already rubbing elbows with the biggest names in showbiz, or at least their prehistoric alter egos. The most famous is Ann-Margret, reimagined as Ann-Margret. The Swedish-American singer and actress voiced herself in the season 4 premiere Ann-Margret Presents, which aired in September of 1963. In the episode, she's already a glamorous Holly rock celebrity idolized by Pebbles. When she arrives in Bedrock for a concert, she ends up staying with the Flintstones, who hilariously don't realize she's the famous star and even babysits Pebbles. Ann-Margret didn't just phone it in either. She performed 2 songs in her actual sultry voice, the ballad The Littlest Lamb as a lullaby, and the rock and roll number I Ain't Gonna Be Your Fool No More. It was part cartoon, part variety special, and fully ridiculous in the best way. Then came Tony Curtis, who showed up as Stony Curtis. In the season 6 episode The Return of Stony Curtis, the movie star comes to Bedrock to film Slave Boy, a parody of Curtis's role in Spartacus. Wilma and Betty win a contest to have Stony come to their house and be their slave for a day, and Fred, being Fred, spirals into full jealous husband mode before deciding he wants to be an actor too. Curtis leaned into his real-life heartthrob image, giving the whole episode a silver screen vibe you didn't usually get from a show about talking dinosaurs and rock puns. And the guest list didn't stop there. Elizabeth Montgomery and Dick York showed up in Bedrock as the Flintstones' neighbors Samantha and Darren, a perfect Bewitched cross promo. At a time when celebrity voice cameos weren't a thing yet, the Flintstones turned Bedrock into the place to be seen, even if you were just a cartoon version of yourself with a rock-themed name. Hollywood had officially moved to the Stone Age and everyone wanted a piece of it. Number 8, the theme song that took 2 seasons to show up. You can probably hum it right now. Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Stone Age family. It's one of the most recognizable TV themes ever written, but here's the kicker. That earworm didn't even exist when the Flintstones first premiered. For the first 2 seasons, the show opened with a jazzy instrumental called Rise and Shine. No lyrics, no yabba dabba doo, just music that sounded like it belonged in a smoky lounge, not a cartoon about prehistoric suburbanites. It wasn't until season 3 that Meet the Flintstones finally showed up, and suddenly, everything clicked. The song was written by Hanna-Barbera's go-to composer Hoyt Curtin, with lyrics by the show's creators William Hanna and Joseph Barbera. According to legend, Curtin knocked it out in a panic when production was running behind schedule, then arranged it for a full 22-piece jazz band and the Randy Van Horn singers. The result was an instant classic. Here's a music nerd fun fact though. The melody of Meet the Flintstones is built on jazz rhythm changes, the same chord structure used in countless swing standards like I Got Rhythm. So yes, Fred Flintstone's theme song has legitimate musical pedigree. Take that, snobs. The version we all know, the one where the singers belt "We'll have a gay old time," had big band energy that made it feel part cartoon and part nightclub act. The main cast even recorded their own version for a 1961 album, but Curtin's arrangement is the one that stuck. What started as a last-minute scramble became one of the most iconic theme songs in TV history. By the time Meet the Flintstones hit the air in season 3, Bedrock had finally found its voice, and we've been singing along ever since. Alright, since we're halfway through, we're going to take a quick pause. If you're enjoying this trip through TV's most famous prehistoric suburb, hit that like button and subscribe. It tells YouTube that you're having a yabba dabba good time. Alright, now let's get back to the countdown with number 7, the 1994 live-action movie that rocked the 90s. In 1994, Hollywood decided to bring Bedrock to life as a full-scale blockbuster, and somehow it actually worked. Universal's live-action Flintstones movie became one of the biggest box office surprises of the decade despite critics absolutely trashing it. The movie won 2 Razzies for its screenplay, but audiences didn't care. It opened with the biggest May weekend in history, stayed at number 1 for 2 straight weeks, and ended up as the 5th highest-grossing film of 1994, pulling in nearly $342 million worldwide on a $46 million budget. That put Bedrock right behind The Lion King, Forrest Gump, and True Lies. Not bad for a prehistoric sitcom brought to life. The casting was perfect as well. John Goodman looked like he'd been born to yell yabba dabba doo. Rick Moranis nailed Barney's loyal goofball energy, and Elizabeth Perkins and Rosie O'Donnell completed the Flintstone Rubble foursome. Throw in Halle Berry as Sharon Stone and Elizabeth Taylor in her final film role, and suddenly Bedrock felt like Beverly Hills with dinosaurs. The B-52s even reinvented themselves as the BC-52s to record a Billboard Top 100 charting version of the classic theme song. Behind the scenes, the production was wild. The movie took almost 10 years to make and burned through an estimated 35 screenwriters before landing on a final script. And filming wasn't easy. The entire cast performed barefoot, so the crew had to ban glass from the set. John Goodman later joked that the heat and bare feet were the hardest part of bringing Fred to life. The movie brought back some Flintstone legends. Harvey Korman, the original voice of the Great Gazoo, showed up as the Dictabird. And Jean Vanderpyle, the original voice of Wilma, made a cameo, her final on-screen connection to the character she'd voiced for decades. So yeah, critics demolished the script, but the production design, costumes, effects, and performances earned genuine praise, and more importantly, the box office spoke louder than any review. For one summer in 1994, Bedrock was the biggest suburb in America. Number 6, the Rubbles' Road to Parenthood. The Flintstones had a knack for tackling surprisingly real problems, and one of the most unexpected was the story of how Barney and Betty Rubble became parents. After Wilma's pregnancy and Pebble's birth became a ratings goldmine, the writers decided to keep the family storylines going by focusing on the Rubbles. What came next was something television rarely touched in the early 1960s: infertility and adoption. In the season 4 episode Little Bam Bam, the Flintstones did something pretty bold. The Rubbles quietly longed for a family, giving viewers something they could relate to instead of just another rock pun. Betty and Barney literally wished on a falling star for a baby. Barney broke the fourth wall to hint at it. But instead of leaving it as a downer, the show offered a solution that was still uncommon on TV at the time: adoption. The next morning, Bam Bam was on their doorstep. He immediately starts destroying things and stealing their hearts. They go through the actual adoption process of paperwork, a court case, and uncertainty before finally being approved to bring him home. It was a surprisingly heartfelt arc for a show known mostly for dinosaur appliances and bowling league drama. And the message was pretty progressive for 1963. Families are built by love, not just biology. Number 5, the merchandising empire that outlived Bedrock. Most TV shows end when the final episode airs. The Flintstones? It just kept going. Straight into your cereal bowl, your medicine cabinet, and pretty much every corner of American life that you can think of. For more than 60 years, Fred, Wilma, and Barney have been hawking everything from breakfast to vitamins, turning a 6-season sitcom into one of the largest running merchandising machines in television history. Let's start with the breakfast aisle. In 1971, Post Foods launched Fruity Pebbles and Cocoa Pebbles, turning Fred and Barney into permanent cereal spokesmen. For decades, they've starred in commercials where Barney schemes to steal Fred's cereal. But check this out. Fruity and Cocoa Pebbles are the longest-running cereal brands based on TV characters still sold today. And the really wild part, they're still popular with kids who have never watched a single episode of the Flintstones. The cereal outlived the cultural memory of the show itself. But Bedrock didn't stop at breakfast. In 1968, Miles Laboratories, later Bayer, launched Flintstones chewable vitamins, shaped like Fred, Wilma, and the gang. Parents trusted them, kids ate them like candy, and decades later, they're still one of the top-selling children's vitamin brands in America. And if that wasn't enough, the brand showed up everywhere. Toys, lunchboxes, board games, clothing, and even entire theme parks with Bedrock City attractions, complete with dinosaur rides and rock-shaped buildings you could actually walk through. By the 1970s, the Flintstones had become a full-blown lifestyle brand before that term even existed. The show ended in 1966, but the merchandise kept printing money for decades and still does to this day. Number 4. The voice of Wilma and the $15,000 decision. Jean Vander gave Wilma Flintstone her voice, her warmth, and her perfectly timed Fred yell that could stop a brontosaurus in its tracks. What she didn't get was a crystal ball. Her story is a perfect example of how nobody in the 1960s could have imagined cartoons would become billion-dollar franchises. During the Flintstones' original run, Vander earned $250 per episode, standard pay for 1960s voice work. When the series wrapped in 1966, she faced a choice that seemed straightforward at the time: take a one-time buyout of $15,000 or gamble on residuals if the show ever got rerun in syndication. Here's the thing. At the time, betting on cartoon reruns sounded absurd. Animation was considered disposable entertainment. Shows aired, then disappeared, and $15,000 in 1966? That was serious money, about $140,000 in today's money. So Vander took the guaranteed cash. It wasn't a bad decision. At the time, it was smart, based on everything anyone knew about television. Except the Flintstones didn't disappear. It became a syndication monster that's still on the air more than 60 years later, generating billions in revenue from reruns, merchandise, and spin-offs. Oops. Vander spent the rest of her life joking ruefully about the decision she'd made. In one interview, she said, "If I got residuals, I wouldn't live in San Clemente, I'd own San Clemente." But she wasn't bitter. She knew she'd made the call everyone would have made. Vander story became the wake-up call that changed the industry. Her experience helped push for better residual structures and protections for voice actors in future contracts. So, while she didn't get to own San Clemente, her legacy helped make sure the next generation of voice actors got a fairer shake. Number 3. When Betty Rubble got a new voice. Everyone knows about the time Barney Rubble's voice changed after Mel Blanc's car accident, but Betty's voice changed too. Most fans never even noticed, even though it happened right in the middle of the show's run. The original voice of Betty Rubble was B. Benaderet, a radio and TV veteran with one of the most recognizable voices in the business. Before Bedrock, she was a regular on the George Burns and Gracie Allen show and a staple of old-school radio comedy. From 1960 to 1964, Benaderet gave Betty her trademark charm. Sweet but sassy, the perfect balance to Barney's lovable goofiness. But after 4 seasons, Hollywood came calling. Benaderet was offered the lead role in CBS's new sitcom Petticoat Junction, playing Kate Bradley. At first, she tried to do both, recording Betty's voice while filming her live-action series. Spoiler alert, that didn't last long. The schedule was brutal, and eventually she had to choose. She picked the starring role and said goodbye to Bedrock. Enter Jerry Johnson, who took over as Betty for the show's final 2 seasons. Here's the impressive part. Johnson's impression was so spot on that most viewers never realized the switch had happened. Same tone, same warmth, same delivery. Johnson would go on to voice Betty in various specials and spin-offs for years after the original series ended, making her version of the character just as iconic as Benaderet's. It's one of those seamless transitions that shows how well the Flintstones kept the machine running even when the people behind the voices moved on. Whether it was B. Benaderet or Jerry Johnson at the mic, Betty Rubble sounded exactly like she was supposed to, and honestly, that's pretty impressive for a show that was basically winging it half the time. Number 2, the Flintstones never really ended. You might think the Flintstones wrapped up when the original series ended in 1966, but that would be a cute thought. In reality, Bedrock never went quiet. It just kept shape-shifting into whatever format would keep the franchise alive for decades to come. The first big revival came in 1971 with the Pebbles and Bam Bam show, which aged the babies up to high schoolers and gave them a rock band called the Bedrock Rockers. It was basically the Archies meets the Stone Age. From there, Hanna-Barbera realized they'd stumbled onto a gold mine. Fred and the gang could be whatever age, in whatever format, for whatever audience needed cartoons that week. The 70s and 80s turned into a full-on Bedrock variety show marathon. There was the Flintstone Comedy Hour in 1972, mixing old episodes with new shorts, Fred Flintstone and Friends in 1977, which was basically a syndicated clip show, the new Fred and Barney show in 1979, which inexplicably added witches and werewolves to the Stone Age, and the Flintstone Comedy Show in 1980, which ballooned into a 90-minute block featuring Bedrock cops, mystery-solving teens, and yet another Captain Caveman revival. Things got even weirder when Hanna-Barbera started mashing Bedrock into other properties. Fred and Barney Meet the Thing, real show. Fred and Barney Meet the Shmoo, also real. At some point, they stopped asking, "Should we?" and just started asking, "What else can we stick Fred Flintstone next to?" By 1986, the Flintstone kids shrank the entire cast down to 10-year-olds and threw in bonus segments like Captain Caveman and Son. Then came the TV movies. In 1993, Pebbles and Bam Bam got married in I Yabba Dabba Doo and became parents in 1994's Holly Rock-a-Bye Baby. And somewhere in between, the Jetsons Meet the Flintstones happened in 1987, a crossover so absurd it somehow made perfect sense. Jumping into the 90s, we got Cave Kids, which turned Pebbles and Bam Bam into educational toddlers. And then in 2020, Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs brought the franchise to streaming with new prehistoric adventures. The formula stayed simple: change the ages, keep the names, print money. For more than 60 years, the Flintstones kept evolving, aging up, down, crossing over, and refusing to stay canceled. In Bedrock, extinction isn't an option. It's just a really long commercial break. Number 1, how a blue dog paved the way for Bedrock. Before Fred Flintstone ever yelled, his entire future depended on a polite blue dog with a southern drawl. In 1958, Hanna-Barbera launched the Huckleberry Hound Show. It was a low-budget cartoon aimed squarely at kids. Nothing fancy, just a charming hound dog getting into trouble every week. But then something weird happened. By 1960, a nationwide survey revealed that nearly half of Huck's audiences were adults. That got Hanna-Barbera's attention real fast. Up until then, television animation was strictly kid stuff. Cartoons belonged on Saturday mornings, not in prime time. But if adults were already tuning in for a talking dog, what would happen if they actually made a show aimed at them? That's when William Hanna and Joseph Barbera had their light bulb moment. They'd already proven they could entertain all ages with Tom and Jerry, but their TV projects kept getting lumped in with Saturday morning kiddie fare. The adult viewership numbers from Huckleberry Hound gave them the ammunition they needed to pitch something bigger: a primetime animated sitcom. So they took the formula of shows like The Honeymooners, wrapped it in cartoon humor, and built a modern Stone Age family that could work for everyone. When The Flintstones premiered in 1960, it became the first animated sitcom in primetime, a show that parents could watch without feeling like they were babysitting. And none of it would have happened without a humble blue dog who proved that cartoons didn't have to be just for kids. Without Huckleberry Hound's unexpected success, there might never have been Bedrock, primetime animation, or the entire wave of adult cartoons that followed. Sometimes the biggest shifts in television come from the most unlikely places. In this case, it was a southern hound dog who accidentally proved that cartoons could grow up too. And there you have it, 15 weird and wonderful facts about the Flintstones, the primetime cartoon that somehow evolved into a decades-long pop culture empire. If you had fun on this trip back to Bedrock, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with the friend who still calls people dum-dums. And check out our playlist of classic TV deep dives in the description. Until next time, this is Remember When.